Hey everyone, welcome back to VoxQueue. Today we've got some wild ones. Grab a drink, settle in, and let's get into it. So the first one starts with something that sounds small. One of those moments that, in the moment, feels like a quick correction. No big deal, just fixing a mistake. Except the person being corrected had already built their reputation around looking competent, around looking like the one who had everything under control. And when that illusion cracked in front of the wrong person, things got messy. Because some people don't react to embarrassment with humility, they react with damage control. And sometimes that damage control means turning the person who told the truth into the villain. So, the person telling this story works in a small office, marketing department. Not huge, maybe a dozen people in the team. Typical open layout, Slack channels buzzing all day, managers who care more about deliverables than personalities. And one coworker in particular, let's call her Melissa, had a reputation. Not the loud kind, the polished kind. Melissa always spoke confidently in meetings, always had updates, always made it sound like she was 3 steps ahead of every project. But people had started noticing a pattern. She wasn't actually doing most of the work. She was repositioning credit. And one morning, that pattern finally collided with reality. The boss calls a quick stand-up meeting about a client deliverable. "All right," he says, looking around the room, "where are we on the analytics report?" Melissa jumps in immediately. "Oh, that's basically finished," she says casually. "Just waiting on a couple final numbers, but it should be ready by today." The problem? The person telling the story is the one actually assigned to the analytics, and it wasn't finished, not even close. He kind of freezes for a second, thinking maybe she's confused, so he says calmly, "Wait, the analytics report? That's still in progress. I'm finishing the data pull today." Melissa turns slowly, and you can almost see the gears spinning. "Oh," she says, "right, I meant the draft version." Except there wasn't a draft either. The boss looks between them. "So what's the actual timeline?" And now the room is quiet, because Melissa had already spoken with confidence, and confidence in offices carries weight. So the storyteller explains, "Yeah, the data from the client dashboard wasn't accessible until yesterday. I just got the full data set last night." The boss nods. "Okay, so realistically, tomorrow?" "Yeah," he says, "tomorrow afternoon." Meeting moves on. No drama, no yelling, just a small correction. Except after the meeting, Melissa walks over, and her tone is different. "Did you really have to say that in front of everyone?" He looks confused. "Say what?" "That it wasn't done," she says. "Because it wasn't." Melissa crosses her arms. "You made it sound like I didn't know what I was talking about." Now this is the moment where you start seeing the psychology kick in. Some people treat information like identity. If the information changes, they feel like their identity is being attacked. He responds carefully, "I wasn't trying to make you look bad, I was just explaining the timeline." Melissa stares for a second. Then she shrugs and walks away. But the weird part? That wasn't the end of it. Over the next couple days, the tone around the office shifts. Small comments, passive-aggressive remarks. Melissa starts telling people things like, "Yeah, the analytics project got delayed because someone didn't communicate properly." Or, "I thought we were aligned, but apparently not everyone was on the same page." And suddenly, the story's changing. Because when someone can't win the moment, they start rewriting the narrative. About a week later, the boss schedules a project review. Standard stuff. Everyone walks through their deliverables, and Melissa, very confidently, starts explaining the timeline for the analytics report again. Except now she says something interesting. "Well, originally we planned to have the report ready earlier, but there was some miscommunication from the data side." The storyteller is sitting there thinking, is she serious? Because now it sounds like he caused the delay. So this time, he doesn't stay quiet. He pulls up the Slack thread and calmly says, "Just to clarify, here's the message where I told the team we wouldn't get the data until Tuesday." The room goes quiet again. Melissa tries to recover. "Well, yeah, but the expectation was still earlier." He scrolls a little further, and here's the message where the client confirmed the data release schedule. Now the boss is leaning forward because receipts change the power dynamic instantly. Melissa shifts in her chair. Well, that's not really the point. But the point had already landed, because when people rely on confidence to control perception, evidence is kryptonite. The boss nods slowly. Okay, that clears that up. Meeting moves on, but the social fallout doesn't stop there. For the next month, Melissa avoids him almost completely. Short replies, cold interactions, because the real damage wasn't the correction, it was the exposure. And here's the psychological layer that makes this story interesting. Melissa didn't get angry because the work wasn't done. She got angry because the illusion of competence cracked in public. There's a behavior pattern psychologists call impression management collapse, when someone builds their status on appearing capable rather than actually being capable. And the moment reality contradicts that image, they scramble to control the narrative, even if it means shifting blame or quietly painting someone else as the problem. But once the receipts show up, that strategy stops working, and the office dynamic quietly resets. Now, if you thought that was messy, this next one is a different kind of chaos. Because the first story was about reputation, this one is about loyalty and what happens when someone openly admits they're about to betray someone. So the person telling this story has a friend. We'll call her Rachel. Rachel has a boyfriend. They've been together about 3 years. Stable relationship, nothing dramatic. But recently, Rachel started talking about one of his friends. Let's call him Jake. And at first, it sounded harmless, just normal conversation. Jake is funny. Jake and I have similar music taste. Jake actually understands my sense of humor. And if you've lived long enough, you know where this kind of commentary usually leads. One night, they're out grabbing drinks, just the two of them, and Rachel suddenly says something strange. I think Jake likes me. The storyteller raises an eyebrow. Okay. Rachel shrugs. I mean, he definitely flirts. And your boyfriend knows about that? Rachel laughs. Oh God, no. Now the conversation gets uncomfortable because there's a difference between noticing attention and entertaining it. So the storyteller asks the obvious question. Are you flirting back? Rachel pauses, then casually says, maybe a little. That sentence alone already tells you where this is going. But then she says something worse. You know what the crazy part is? What? If Jake made a move, I honestly don't know if I'd stop it. The table goes silent, because now we've crossed from hypothetical to intention. Rachel, the storyteller says carefully, you have a boyfriend. I know. So why are you even entertaining this? Rachel eyeballs twice. It's not that serious. But it was serious, because a week later things escalated. Rachel starts texting Jake constantly, inside jokes, late-night conversations, and she openly tells the storyteller about it. I feel like he gets me more than my boyfriend does. Now this is where the moral pressure starts building, because watching someone slowly line up a betrayal feels gross. So the storyteller asks her directly, why don't you just break up if you're unhappy? Rachel shakes her head. Because I don't know if Jake actually wants something serious. And there it is, the backup plan dynamic. Her boyfriend isn't a partner, he's a safety net. Psychologically, this is called relationship hedging, where someone keeps their current partner while testing potential replacements. It's emotionally selfish behavior disguised as uncertainty. But the real twist comes later. Rachel texts the storyteller one night. Jake invited me to a party. My boyfriend can't come. Now alarms are going off. What are you planning to do? Rachel replies with a smirking emoji. Just see what happens. At this point, the storyteller feels sick, because now it's not accidental, it's deliberate. So they make a decision. They message Rachel's boyfriend. Not dramatically, not accusing, just honest. Hey, I feel weird telling you this, but Rachel has been talking about Jake in a way that doesn't sound respectful to your relationship. He responds almost immediately. What do you mean? And the truth starts coming out. The texts, the comments, the party invitation, and when he confronts Rachel, everything explodes. Rachel calls the storyteller furious. How could you tell him that? Because you were planning to cheat. I was just thinking about it.
That sentence right there is the moment the friendship breaks, because intention matters, and Rachel had already crossed that line mentally. Within a week, the relationship ends. Rachel blames the storyteller for ruining her life, but the reality is simpler. The betrayal was already in motion. The exposure just accelerated the consequences. And the psychological takeaway here is people who treat loyalty like a temporary convenience often believe they're entitled to multiple emotional options until someone forces the situation into the open, because secrecy is the oxygen of that kind of behavior. Remove it, and the whole thing collapses. But this one is strategic, because the person in this story didn't just deal with a difficult coworker, they dealt with a supervisor who built his authority on intimidation. And eventually, that intimidation backfired. So the storyteller worked
A retail warehouse job. Night shift. Nothing glamorous, just long hours, heavy lifting, and a supervisor named Greg. Greg had one leadership style: control. He micromanaged everything, he insulted people constantly, and he loved reminding employees how replaceable they were. Don't like it? Greg would say, there's the door. But the worst part? Greg bent the rules constantly. Time card edits, safety shortcuts, equipment violations, stuff that could get people hurt. At first, the storyteller kept their head down. Most people did, because confronting someone in authority at work can destroy your paycheck overnight. But Greg pushed too far. One night, he orders the team to move inventory with a forklift that had a known brake issue. Someone points it out. Greg, that forklift isn't cleared. Greg waves it off. It's fine, stop whining. The storyteller says quietly, company policy says we can't operate unsafe equipment. Greg turns. You trying to tell me how to do my job? No, I'm saying the brakes are bad. Greg steps closer. If you don't like the way I run things, clock out. That's the moment something shifts, because intimidation only works as long as the other person accepts the power dynamic. Instead of arguing, the storyteller starts documenting. Photos of equipment, screenshots of time card edits, emails about safety complaints, and it goes on for months, because when someone abuses authority regularly, patterns form, and patterns create evidence. Eventually, the storyteller files a formal report with corporate compliance, not emotional, just factual. Dates, times, photos, witness names, and then they wait. At first, nothing happens. Greg keeps acting like nothing is wrong, but 2 weeks later, corporate auditors show up unannounced. Suddenly, Greg looks nervous. They start asking questions, reviewing logs, checking safety reports, and the deeper they dig, the worse it gets. Because Greg hadn't just bent the rules, he'd been falsifying safety inspections and altering employee time records, both of which are serious violations. Within a month, Greg is suspended, then fired. But the story doesn't stop there, because falsifying safety records in certain industries, that's not just a company issue, it's a legal one. So eventually, Greg ends up facing an investigation, and the guy who used to walk around saying, "There's the door," was suddenly the one being escorted out. That's the moment where the power dynamic flips completely. And the psychology behind this one is fascinating, because Greg relied on authority intimidation, a tactic where someone exaggerates their power to silence pushback. But intimidation collapses the moment someone stops reacting emotionally and starts collecting facts. Evidence neutralizes dominance every time. Now, when you look at all three of these stories together, there's a common thread running through them: control of perception. Melissa tried to control how competent she looked. Rachel tried to control multiple romantic outcomes. Greg tried to control people through authority. Different situations, same psychological imbalance. All three relied on a version of the same assumption: if I control the narrative, I control the outcome. But the moment transparency enters the room, that illusion breaks. Receipts expose workplace reputation games. Honesty exposes relationship manipulation. Documentation exposes authority abuse. And suddenly, the person who looked powerful 5 minutes earlier looks very different, because control built on image
always collapses when reality becomes visible. That's why people who rely on manipulation hate exposure more than anything. It removes the environment they need to operate. So the real question in all three of these stories isn't who was right, it's this: at what point do you stop protecting someone else's version of reality? At what point do you decide the truth matters more than the comfort of the situation? Because every one of these storytellers faced that moment. Correct the lie or stay quiet. Expose the betrayal or let it happen. Document the abuse or keep your head down. None of those choices feel comfortable, but they do something important. They reset the balance, and that's usually the moment the real story begins. This is VoxQueue, and around here we don't just read the drama, we break it down. I want to know, who crossed the line the most? Drop your take below. I read them all. I'll see you in the next one.